All right, I think we're ready to get started. Okay, so welcome everyone to tonight's information session about the role of the student trustee and Segawanagar at HWDSB. We wanted to welcome you all. Thanks for taking the time to meet with us tonight. Before we get started, though, we do want to begin with a land acknowledgement, and I'll pass that over to Gloria.
For sure. So I'm just going to begin with a land acknowledgement. The Hamilton Wentworth District School Board acknowledges our presence on ancestral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Confederacy land as determined by the District 1 Spoon Treaty. The intent of this agreement is for all nations sharing this territory to do so responsibly, respectfully, and sustainably in perpetuity. We respect the long-standing relationships with the local Indigenous communities, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River.
Thank you, Gloria. Before we get into our discussion and talk to you all about the role of student trustee and how this election cycle is going to work, we just wanted to give you a bit of an idea of what would be on the agenda for tonight. We'll be doing some introductions. So Gloria and I will talk a little bit about our experience in the role and why we ran, giving a very clear breakdown of what is a student trustee, how the position functions, the role that we play on the board. We also have Superintendent Estella Jones, who will be talking to us a little bit about the position of Segawanagar, which is an Indigenous student representative on the board. And she will also be talking to us about some of the nitty-gritty of the election process. And then Gloria and I will give a brief rundown of some of the roles and responsibilities, and then we'll be going right into a Q&A so that if you have any questions, we can answer them live. And just as a bit of a heads up, Gloria and I will also be providing resources and information about the role and responsibilities on our Instagram account that we post as the HWDSB Student Trustees. I can put that in the chat. So if there's anything that we don't get into detail in tonight, you can definitely find it there.
All right, so I guess we should start off with a brief introduction. So my name is Gloria Lee. I'm a grade 12 student at Westmont Secondary, go by she, her pronouns. I can pass it off to Aisha and then, yeah.
Yeah, my name is Aisha. I'm a grade 12 student at Ancaster High. I also use she, her pronouns. And Gloria and I make up the student trustees for the 2022-2023 school year. We just wanted to share a little bit about why we ran and what some of our priorities are in the role. But we won't get into too much detail. We really are passionate about bringing student voice to the table and making sure that everything we do as a school board is centered around the students and your experiences. Specifically, we've been really strong advocates for mental health resources for students, for making sure that our schools are inclusive spaces and that we're engaging with students all the time. And then I'll let Gloria talk a little bit about, how we get here and why we ran.
Yeah, so I think every student kind of comes into this position in different ways. So I actually found out about this position through my school email. So I wasn't really aware of what a student trustee was really until I received the email. But I guess I just always had questions for how our board actually ran and how decisions were actually being made. So I just really want to be involved and, kind of advocate for student at the board level, which was really interesting. And this experience has been so rewarding. So that's kind of how I found out about the opportunity. And yeah, I'm really a strong advocate for well-being and just student voice. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Aisha.
Yeah, I thought I would mention for anyone who might be in grade 10 on the call, I was in grade 10 when I ran in my first election, and I served my first term in grade 11, and then I ended up coming back for a second term, which has been honestly like so exciting, and I've gotten to build some really amazing relationships at the board and take on some really cool projects. So if any of you are in grade 10 and you're like, maybe I'll wait till next year, it's definitely worth it to throw your name in the hat now. So, to give a very brief definition of what is a student trustee is a member of the board who is elected by their peers to represent students at the board table. What we kind of function in two main spaces. That the first is the Board of Trustees, where we are, equal members of the board participating in discussion. And the other, and I'll pass it off to Gloria, is the Student Senates.
Yeah, so possibly one of the most important roles is actually getting to connect with students, and through Student Senate, we have the privilege to meet with students, senators from across all elementary and secondary schools, and it serves as an advisory group where, they kind of are like the bridge between all the schools as well as us, as well as the board. So what we really like to do is like to share our board discoveries. We share them with our student senate group just to gauge some student voice opinions, and we can kind of relay them back to the board. So
Yeah.
that's what student senate is.
If you think about it, like at a very basic level, we are members of the board who are also students, and we also chair the student senates, which is made up of representatives from across the schools, and the student senators are leaders within their own schools who are able to share that back with their school communities. And that way, we're kind of making sure that there is a strong bridge between the board and the students that it serves. All right, now we'll pass it off to Superintendent Estella Jones, who will be giving us a bit more information about the other student trustee position, the Sagawanagar-Ladon.
Thank you so much. And I'm so pleased to see so many students who've joined us this afternoon to find out more about the role of student trustee. It really is a unique opportunity and an important way for student voice to make its way to the Board of Trustees and to Executive Council, so to people like myself in my role. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few slides that will explain a little bit more about the process. All of the information is also posted on our board website under the trustees tab if you go to our board website, but I'll walk you through just so you have a general idea. So there are 3 student trustee positions. I have here, one of the positions is for Sagawanagar-Ladon, which is somebody who's raised through CC Rose, which is our Indigenous student group. So it's one of the positions. It doesn't necessarily mean it's just tied to one person, but one vote. When there is a vote that includes the student trustee voice, would be given to Sagawanagar-Ladon. So interested candidates would be asked to complete an interest form no later than January 26th at 4 p.m. And the information, again, is on our board website. Eligible candidates are invited to CC Rose, which is the group for Indigenous students. And then there's a process that they work through where certain students will be raised by their peers, and then that name would be forwarded to us by February 28th, and an announcement would go forward March 2023. It has to be ratified by the board, so there's some procedural pieces tied to that, but that's generally the timeline. The key dates right now that you would need to be aware of is the January 26th, because if you're interested in that position, then that letter of interest would need to come in. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, the other 2 positions are the 2 elected student trustee positions, and those are the positions that Gloria and Aisha hold at the moment. So the initial stage is similar in that an interest form needs to be submitted by January 26th at 4 p.m. And then there's a package of materials, one of which is a video that needs to be submitted by February 8th. So as an interested candidate, there's a package that explains the process. There's a little bit of information about privacy and being aware what it means to go through this process, as well as if you were to hold the office. So there's some information around that. And then if you're still interested and your families provide consent, if you're under 18, then you would complete this video and submit it to back to us. There's a name on the package, Heather Miller. Her contact information is there, and that video should be submitted by February 8th. Then it would be posted on the HWDSB website the week of February 13th to 17th. And there will be a communication to all students across the board for them, inviting them to watch the videos from all the interested candidates. And then that will inform them prior to making their vote. Okay, then the actual election will take place the week February 21st to the 24th. And it goes out to all grade students 7 through 12. And they vote for 2 candidates. The election is not based on the straight number of votes. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that works later. I think Aisha or Gloria will explain that process. It's not like a raw count of number of votes. But once it's tallied, then the top 2, the candidates with the top 2 number of votes in the scenario will then be the trustees for the following year. And then again, the formal announcement and process for it to be accepted by the board happens in March. Okay, there is one portion that you need to be aware of. If you are running, if you do put in a letter and then you're going to be following through with the next steps, you do need to be aware that there's some expectations around campaigning. Okay, so campaigning is defined as a planned set of activities that people carry out over a period of time in order to achieve something, according to Collins Dictionary. With regards to the student trustee elections, you are not able to engage in any campaigning across any social media platforms, which may include posts to vote for yourself, posting printed posters, handing out print material at your school or at any other school, asking people for their votes, or engaging in any behavior that could be presumed as asking others to vote for you. Okay. If we find out or are informed of campaigning, then we will need to follow up and do some investigation around that. So like, I don't want you to be, uneasy about it. So a warning would be issued, but should it continue, then there's the possibility of being removed from the process altogether. Okay, so I just want to be clear that campaigning is not permitted in this process. Okay, so I think that's it for me. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited about all the interest.
Of course, yeah. So now we're just going to be going over some key timeline and just some key dates for you to be mindful of. This slideshow and this presentation will be available on the website. However, if you want to take a screenshot right now, that's totally okay. So the first thing we have is the virtual information session. That's what you are here today. We're just giving you a little breakdown of the student trustee role. The first deadline you kind of have to be mindful of is the letter of interest. This will be available online January 13th, and the deadline for this to be submitted to Heather Miller is January 26th. So that will be your first deadline. Candidates will be confirmed and sent video instructions by February 1st, and the videos will be posted on the HWDSB website by February 13th. And the voting period is from the 21st to the 24th, and this will include all grades 7 to 12 students.
Yep, just to give a quick note about the interest form, that will include signatures from you, a parent or legal guardian, and your principal, as well as a quick written question that you have to answer that you submit with your interest form. So you do have from the 13th to the 26th to get that in. That's probably the most important first step in the election process to qualify you as a candidate. And like Gloria said, a few days later, you will get the questions and instructions for recording your videos, and voting will be we'll take 1 week, 1 school week, where all grade 7 to 12s can vote. So keep that in mind. The letter of interest goes out tomorrow. So we kind of alluded to this a bit earlier, but our votes are not what you would consider a popular vote. So basically, any single candidate with the most votes, when we count them all up, doesn't necessarily win. And that's not how we count it either. This visual kind of helps you understand a little bit better how the top 2 candidates are selected. So as you can see, each school will have their eligible students, so anyone in grade 7 to 12, voting. And the votes of each school will be counted to determine two candidates who have received the most votes from students at that school. That becomes then the vote of that school, and all of those votes are then put into a pool where the top 2 candidates from that pool become the student trustees. So if you can see on the very far right, the students here selected the red and purple candidate as their top 2. That becomes the candidates from their school. This school selected red and blue. Those become the candidates from their school, and so on, purple and blue and red. Then this gets kind of disregarded, and it's only this part that determines the actual winners. So there's 1, 2, 3 votes for red, 1, 2, 3 votes for blue, 2 votes for purple. Blue and red candidates are the winners of the election. So I hope that kind of helps make it a little bit clearer how the election works. It's not what people automatically assume it might be. So that's how votes are counted. We'll also be going over a few key responsibilities and areas of the role, and then we'll be getting right into questions. We do have good time, so I'll pass it off to Gloria to get us started on what's involved in being a student trustee.
So yeah, as Aisha mentioned, we do sit on the board as student representatives. So this is kind of what the Monday night meetings are. So they're board meetings with the roundtable of trustees that are elected by the community. You can consider the commitment to be every Monday. It's normally every other Monday, but just to keep things, I guess, straight, just consider every Monday you have these commitments. They're normally around 5 to 10 p.m., depending on how long the board meetings go, it varies. Yeah, you can see that we don't have meetings during holidays, but generally they're Monday nights. I guess another just a little tidbit is try to prepare try to read through the materials before going to the board. This gives you a chance to actually ask questions during the board or make some comments regarding the materials that you read prior. There's also Senate meetings. So this is the group of secondary and elementary school senators that you kind of meet with. Normally it's once every 2 weeks where you would meet with the Senate. Responsibilities there include creating an agenda and preparing for some materials that you want to just talk about with your senators. Aisha, if you want to take over.
Yeah. This is all to give you a general idea of what the time commitment is like. Something else that you might do is attend meetings with staff, either to check in on how you're adjusting to the role and to also get support and also get any guidance you might need with projects or questions you might have. We have lots of support, and we'll talk about that later, to kind of guide you in the right direction if you want to connect with certain people to work on different things. Another thing that is a time commitment in being a student trustee is attending conferences for OSTA-ACO, which is the Ontario Student Trustees Association, which we will also talk about a little bit later. But just to give you a sense, those are 3, and it ends up being 4 conferences a year. Thursday to Sunday, you're there for the full weekend, connecting with student trustees from across the province, hearing from guest speakers, attending workshop sessions, and overall just gaining some professional development in your role. And an important note is that transportation is available to get to and from meetings. Everything that you need to do in your role will be very accessible to you. So that's something that, might be a consideration before you run, but also just to kind of give that as a general rule, it will be very accessible for you. Another thing to mention is every week in the role kind of looks a little bit different in terms of the time commitment. A lot of people will ask, like, oh, how many hours a week is it? It's really, really hard to tell. Some weeks are 15-hour weeks, some weeks are 2-hour weeks. But in general, think about time you need to respond and answer emails, send emails, attend meetings for board meetings, attend meetings for committees, attend Senate meetings, plan Senate meetings, prepare for board meetings, prepare for conferences, just to give a general sense of like, yes, there is very specific times when you are in the board office at the board table, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than when you're in the room. And a lot of it is like you have to be like self-motivate yourself almost to do the work that happens outside, but that's a very almost more important part of the role, I would say. But yeah, so while we're kind of thinking about the responsibilities and the commitment, we wanted to also give you a sense of like who is here to support the student trustees and the kind of resources that you'll have in the role. So when you're physically at the board table, which is shaped like a horseshoe, you'll have trustees who are sitting around the table who are able to help you if you have a quick question. Gloria and I both sit next to different trustees who, hey, what's this agenda item? I have a quick question about this. When should I ask? Things like that. And you also have a dedicated student trustee mentor. It is currently trustee Elizabeth Wong, who, fun fact, used to be a student trustee when she was in high school, and now she's back as an elected trustee and also the student trustee mentor. That is your general go-to person, but in general, any board member will be more than happy to help and guide you in the right direction and act as a resource to you in your role. And then I'll pass it off to Gloria here.
There we go. Yeah, so we also have, like Aisha mentioned, there are just so many available resources, and even this is just a set list that we kind of provided. If you have any further questions, there are always people that you reach out to. Even Estella, if we have any questions, she can help us, provide us like with a link or a bridge to people that could help us in terms of that sense. We also have principal advisors, and this is just a resource for during Senate meetings in case they want to lead some discussions or just facilitate some conversations. This is a possibility, and yeah, it just happens that we have principal advisors during our Senate meetings. I briefly mentioned about the superintendent of student achievement. So that's Stella. She basically just supports us in any way that we kind of require. And as well as the Indigenous education team, they provide additional resources for the Sega Wanakarla. And yeah, and whatever questions you have, you have us as resources. So feel free to always message us on Instagram or email us, and we're only an email away. Yeah.
So the next thing that we wanted to talk briefly about, which we mentioned earlier, which is the Ontario Student Trustees Association, which is a way for you in the role to kind of branch out and connect with student trustees from across the province. Now, this is probably one of me and Gloria's favorite parts about being a student trustee. You meet lots of people who are very similar to you. You make lots of amazing friends. Like I've made some lifelong friends at OSTA conferences. Some of my friends are from London, the Ottawa Valley, Toronto, and we've been able to kind of support each other in our roles, even while we're in different cities. Officially, OSTA ACO is an organization made up entirely of students, specifically student trustees. OSTA ACO is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization which kind of serves two functions: to host conferences for student trustees and also advocate for student trustees provincially. The three conferences in the year are the annual general meeting, which happens in May. This is kind of like we're passing the torch from one set of student trustees to the next. It's your introduction to OSTA and also the conclusion of your OSTA journey. The fall general meeting, which typically happens in October, and the board council conference, which typically happens in February. And usually the AGM and the FGM take place in Toronto, and BCCs takes place in Ottawa. Another important thing to note about OSTA ACO is there are also additional opportunities to get involved in the role through either an elected executive council, our working groups, which serve as specific committees to advocate in certain areas, as well as our public and Catholic board cabinets. I should mention that OSTA is made up of public and Catholic school boards, so it really is like a very unique organization. I'm also the president of OSTACO this year, which I thought I would mention because if you have any very specific questions about the organization and what we do, please let me know. Gloria also is the chair of our Ontario Student Voice Awards working group, which is a way that we give scholarships to students who are leaders in their own communities. It's a really, really cool way for us to give back to students. And I'll pass it off to Gloria.
So this might all seem like information overload and it might be really overwhelming, but trust me, like all of us have been there too. And just some previous, I guess, experiences and advice from former trustees is it is a really demanding role and it does have an impact on, your academic and social lives. And it's just like, it's about finding that balance. So it's always okay to set boundaries in terms of this role. Remember that you are a student before you are a student trustee. So setting those boundaries is incredibly important. And I think this is just something you will learn as you grow in this role. The board table is really scary at first. You're working with a group of trustees, adult trustees to be exact, and that might be an incredibly different experience to what you're normally accustomed to. So it's okay to be scared. It's totally fine. And it might even be like a good thing, just to keep your nerves at bay. But again, we have so many resources even during board, like our trustee mentors, to, kind of guide us throughout the meeting. There's also secondary senate. 1 year is an extremely short amount of time. Even now, I feel like I'm just entering this role, but it has been a while. But yeah, 1 year is a really short amount of time. So just be sure to set your goals straight and set some timelines. And you don't have to, overachieve. It's not about, changing the system, but try to find, some passion projects that you want to kind of lead through Senate. And with elementary Senate, it's less about creating those initiatives and more about developing our elementary senators, and it's more leadership development in that sense.
Yeah. So, like Gloria mentioned, you might be thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go to meetings every other Monday night and from 5 to 10 p.m. Like, this is crazy. Like, who in their right mind would want to do this? And you know what? We do get this question quite a lot. But at the end of the day, it has honestly been such a rewarding experience and such an incredible way to develop as people, as leaders, to kind of get an inside look at how school boards function and how provincial and local politics function. We've been able to learn exactly, the beginning to end process of a new policy being made at the board. We've been able to connect with students who are taking on such unique initiatives across Hamilton. We've been able to develop our own, professional etiquette, which, is a skill that you will take with you in a professional career. I thought this is a good opportunity to highlight a few specific examples of how student trustees have been able to take an issue and from beginning to end really see it through. One that we're in the process of right now is creating a new mental health strategy at HWDSB. So starting even in the last school year, at the beginning of the year where we proposed a survey. We said, hey, we want to do a survey. We want to ask students what they think about mental health resources. Then that becomes, an official survey that goes out to schools. And then it's something that we start promoting. And then we go through results. And then through those results, we discover findings. And from those findings, we develop a long-term plan. So from beginning to end, we've been able to kind of see that through. And me and Gloria are in those kind of final stages, which is really exciting. Another thing is, and a lot of you might have seen or heard about this in the news, but the student dress code was a policy that was put forward by the student trustees. We saw that it was something that students really cared about, and we were able to propose a new policy. We now have that policy in our schools, and we're kind of in the process of making sure that it is effective and serves its function. But that's just kind of a sense of like how this role has been really rewarding. Some advice to kind of follow up to what Gloria said from us and any former student trustees. It is okay to be afraid in this role, and people will tell you, no, what are you talking about? Like you are so capable. You are perfect for this role. But even then it can still be scary. You can feel confident and still be afraid. But at the end of the day, your voice at the board table is very unique and very powerful, and you should make sure that you use it not only wisely but often. Speak often and tell, like, say, just be authentic and be true to your experiences and to the experiences of your friends and your peers and the students around you. And also make sure you get itemized receipts at conferences when you buy food. But we'll kind of move into the Q&A session. Gloria, anything else before we kind of jump into questions?
Yeah, I guess we can just kind of conclude this section with, so the role of student trustee, it does seem really daunting, and you do have set responsibilities, but outside of that, this role is whatever you make it to be. So if you do have a lot of passions in, let's say, mental health or environmental sustainability, maybe these are just things that you would like to address at the board level, this is something that you can totally do, and we have a lot of resources for that as well. Yeah, I think that's just the one thing I wanted to add. It's really whatever you make it to be, and it's such a rewarding experience. And with that, we can move on to the Q&A session. So if you have any questions about anything that we covered today, or just if you have any questions in general, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute, go ahead.
Or please raise your hand and unmute.
Oh,
We'd
yes.
love to hear from all of you. Oh, and like we mentioned earlier, this information will be found on the board website, hwdsb.on.ca.